Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everybody, it's Debbie Potts. I'm doing a new episode of the Whole Athlete Podcast where we talk about different ways to transform the whole you from the inside out with elements of the holistic method, which includes nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, movement, digestion, and gut health, and hydration, and most importantly is happiness. And today I have Dr. Elena on, who's a naturopath doctor from Bastyr, and we'll kind of get your rundown. So I appreciate your time coming on. You're in Bellevue and near me, and talk about what you do for a living and why you do it. What's your passion and your purpose?
Thank you so much, Debbie, for having me on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here and, to talk about the topic of the day. But I am a naturopathic physician. I do practice in Bellevue, and my passion is to help people optimize their health. Mm-hmm. And my big why behind that is that I truly believe that when we have a healthy body, we're that much more likely to commit to our goals, to commit to our purpose, and to really reach our potential, because that's what really life is about, right? We're on this journey and we're given these bodies, and sometimes it's not easy to navigate the journey of health. So I really, I'm a doctor, but I'm also a coach. I'm also a detective. Mm-hmm. I wear a lot of hats during the day, but most of my specialty, I see a lot of women in my practice. I would say majority of my patients are women looking to lose weight, optimize their gut health, balance hormones, which hormones are very tricky. But my greatest passion is to give people the gift of knowledge, and the gift of knowledge of being able to know their bodies, become more in tune with their bodies, have better conversations with the healthcare providers, their trainers, their nutritionists, and really help them optimize their health so that it works for them.
That's perfect. It's kind of similar to me, and what I found, I was in my mastermind fitness professional business retreat last weekend, and our taglines for the Mastermind Institute is your purpose, your passion, and impact. But what we're working on is always, what's your why and what's your verb? And mine, it came out just from talking to people, and they told me, well, your verb is I educate and share. I love to learn, and I love to share that information with others to help them optimize their health. So as you do too, it's like we educate because we're passionate about the information that's out there is confusing. And the topic we're going to get into today is that what you and I were talking a couple months ago when we ran into each other on the airplane is that fat is a big confusion for a lot of people based on our knowledge from media and from books and magazines, as well as our medical system. So let's dive into the topic today is, about our fear of fat, and we need fats. And we always talk about in this show how to become metabolically efficient and use fat for fuel. As we're sitting here, as I go for a lower heart rate workout, I should be burning fat when I'm sleeping, but we're often sugar burners. And a lot of times we talk about keto and low carb, high fat, and a common question is what fats are good and what's bad, and people are still scared of healthy fats too. So let's have you just take over wherever you want to start, and we'll see where we go to.
Yeah, that is such a big question. Fat, right? What fats do I eat? What fats do I need to avoid? Are fats good? Are fats bad? And I really think that it's only become really recent over the last few years that hey, not all fats are created equal. And the things that we have learned in previous generations where, fat is what causes heart disease, fat is what will cause stroke, fat is what will basically lead you to your death. Mm-hmm. We've actually learned that those decades of being exposed to this, not necessarily the best research, have led people to make, worse decisions in their diet, right? From low fat to no fat. Mm-hmm. When in reality, we have learned, and there's been a lot of great, doctors and researchers in the area of nutrition who have come out and said, actually, we want you to eat more fat. Fat is actually what's going to help you feel better. Yeah. It's going to help you lose the weight. And what I absolutely agree with you is that most of the time people are sugar burners, right? And if we think about, like, if we're going to dive into a little bit of the macros, you know, we have the carbohydrates, we have the protein, and we have the fat, and our body is always trying to balance its energy sources and reserves, right? Mm-hmm. And so the reason why we're sugar burners is because it's really easy for us. We've taken some carbohydrates. It's really easy to process that. We get a little boost in energy, and then we hit a slump, right? And so it's been really recent that we're actually learning that actually when we eat more fat, we become more efficient metabolizers. There's a lot more energy per gram of fat than there is per gram of protein or per gram of carbohydrates. But I think what people get caught up on is that we're always looking for that magic bullet. Okay, well, I'm going to start eating more fat, when people don't realize that it can actually take time to introduce fat properly into the diet. It doesn't mean that you necessarily need to go and start eating butter, right, with everything. Yeah. That there's kind of rhyme and reason in how you do it. And that's one of my passions, is really helping people decide on how do we change those macros, you know, how, depending on your goals, depending on your lifestyle.
Well, I think, you know, we've talked before about nutritional therapy. As a nutritional therapy practitioner growing in that field, is what they say really makes sense to me. Is this about balancing your blood sugar and avoiding the spikes of insulin, which seems to be related to fat storage if we have that excess blood sugar and excess insulin, and we're carrying that into our fat cells. So one diet doesn't fit all. So one way to eating, everyone's different, and treating people as bio individuals, that not everyone should be keto. Not everyone should be just, you know, paleo can be a lot of carbohydrates in there. So finding what real food plan works for you to balance your blood sugar, so you are avoiding those insulin spikes, so we can be burning fat for our main fuel source. So I love the analogy of the Duraflame log versus kindling to feed that fire. So we want to burn fat, but often we need to eat fat to burn fat, which is opposite, because, you know, what we've been taught for a whole lifetime, people are scared of fat. I grew up, and I wrote this in my book, Life is Not a Race, looking at my background of stress that probably created in my body because I ate low fat, non-fat, everything. And I was afraid of a lot of meat. So I ate all of soy, and I probably did like the highest carb diet possible because I was going for that low calorie stuff too. And going back to what you said about 9 calories a gram for a fat. And so people think, not like you were just saying, fat's a good source of energy, but most people think fat is a lot of calories. I want to not gain weight because I need to be low calorie, because 3,500 calories equals 1 pound supposedly. So that's that whole mentality to lose weight. People want to think low calorie. So take that and see, you know, what process is in your mind about those ideas and concepts.
I definitely have a few things to say about that. And, you know, you and I frequently talk about and kind of look back about our experience as athletes, right? Mm-hmm. And we put in a lot of hours into our bodies, and we put in a lot of time thinking about, you know, diet and nutrition in the context of being a competitive athlete. And I remember I struggled. I started to play semi-professional tennis when I was a teenager. And talk about, you know, a young female having certain body image issues, right? Playing tennis, being a competitive athlete, not really knowing what to eat. And I resorted to that, okay, for me to be strong and lean, I need to eat a high carb, low fat diet. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, and you know, the book about the big fat surprise, right? Which talks about just even the importance of fat for women and children in development. And all of it has to do with so many hormones that are dependent on the fat that we take in, right? In order to produce the hormones, the cholesterol and the hormones. And so I think just educating people about that fat is not bad. And we'll talk about kind of how do we incorporate fat into the diet is huge. And kind of to look back about what you were saying is that not all fat is created equal, right? And that we hear this, that fat, you know, has like 9 calories per gram, but fat is metabolized differently. You know, butter will get metabolized differently than margarine, which we'll talk about, right? Then, you know, the processed fats, you know, it'll get metabolized differently than avocados, than nuts. And so like, healthy fats versus unhealthy fats will get metabolized differently. And what you choose to fuel your body with, the types of fats, right, will also impact your metabolism will also impact how you feel. And there's a lot of research about what we eat can turn on or turn off our genes. So it's a very important topic.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to go into the benefits of fat, why fat soluble vitamins or neurotransmitters. So talk a little bit what you know about why we need fat. Why is there such importance that I think, everyone should go read that Big Fat Surprise book, because it's 500 pages, but it has 10 years of research in it, and it will change the whole concept of what is fat and understand the whole Ansel Keys, where it all started from, and how politically skewed all these results and all the information we get. So if you still don't believe us when we're done talking, go read that book. But talk about the benefits of fat and the role of fat in our body for health and optimizing our health.
Absolutely. Well, fat is so important for hormone production. We are a bunch of chemicals and signaling molecules that are constantly delivering messages from one cell to another. And so fat is the building block for hormones, right? We need cholesterol to produce a lot of these major hormones, just as we need protein, right, to produce these chemical messengers. The other thing with, I'm going to say that, which is one of the reasons why a lot of athletes, when they go through strenuous times of exercising and training, and not even athletes, people who live a very stressful lifestyle, and they just burn through things like this, and they stress their adrenal glands, they're not as efficient in producing those hormones. And then we start to seeing all these different symptoms of breakdown. And we, like you and I talked about adrenal fatigue and how important it is to support your adrenal gland and your hormone function with healthy fats. But then also fat, if we look at what makes us, we have billions of cells that make the human body. And each cell has a fat membrane that essentially protects the cell, right? So things can flow in and flow out, but the building block of that is fat. And, we want to emphasize the good fats, again, which help to restore and build that phospholipid membrane, which protects the cell from the external environment. And then our brain, omega-3 fats. If you want to have a healthy brain, if you want to improve your mental focus, if you want to improve clarity and increase your longevity so you can remember the life that you live, you have to eat fat. And, if our brain is a lot of mostly omega-3, we want to make sure that those are the kind of fats that we're taking in.
Yes. And I think, that's kind of leads to keto and the benefits of keto if people are into that. One, I would say, yes, low carb, higher fat, more of a ketosis diet does help people for brain health, and it's not for everybody. But the biggest thing I keep bringing up, side note, is that you have to be able to digest and break down your fats, which for me, with my adrenal exhaustion, HPA axis dysregulation, it does impact, and I think a lot of people have impacted ability to break down and emulsify their fats, because we have liver overload and congested liver and affecting our gallbladder and our bile, and all that's connected. So I think a lot of people, if they're switching to a higher fat diet, see a naturopath or functional medicine or NTP that's going to help you figure out the root cause of it not working for you. Because I just had someone come up to me last week and going, this keto thing's not working for me, but she's total adrenal exhausted and things aren't working. I'm like, well, so just a side note there, but the brain health, talk about what your opinion is on just the importance of fat on your brain. As you said, the focus and the brain fog people have, and lack of focus and clarity, and how it's related to if it's sugar in our diet too much and not enough fat, or what your experience is with role of brain health.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what happens whenever we, kind of like we talked about sugar burners, right? And relying mostly on carbohydrates for fuel. What happens is that when we consume higher carbohydrate, and I'm talking about not like the healthy carbohydrates, right? Not the ones that take slower time to burn and digest, and they're slower to increase the blood sugar. But when we increase our sugar intake, we get this spike in blood sugar. And for maybe 30 minutes to an hour, it's very individual. We feel like this high, like, oh my gosh, time to get my work done. I feel so great, followed by a sudden dip, right, in energy. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So in my practice, whenever I'm working with people on improving their focus, or their mental well-being, I really try to introduce healthy fats into the diet because it slows down the digestion. It slows down the release of sugar into the bloodstream. And sorry, I'm going to turn my phone off.
And distractions people have. Well, that's a good example right there is, I think focus and clarity. I just was saying this at the seminar last week in my retreat, that we have so many distractions as our phones and, having all those alerts and everything that you're trying to focus, but you can't because you got this beeping sound and alerts or flashes coming in your phone, or now everyone's Apple Watches and having all these things. But I think that, as well as eating a high sugary carb diet, is affecting our brain health and our focus and our clarity and our concentration.
Right. Well, sugar is pro-inflammatory. And I kind of want to look back to, when I was in school and we were learning about plaque buildup, right? And arteries and the shrinking of the blood vessels and the causing of stroke. We were learning about that it's not necessarily cholesterol, right? That was responsible for that, but it's the high carb diet. It's the sugar, the glucose that's circulating in the bloodstream that's actually damaging the blood vessels. And that process of damaging the blood vessels, it causes an inflammatory response. So what happens is you have all these white blood cells that make up our immune system floating to these areas that are damaged in the blood vessels. And of course we have plaque formation. And so people are, and kind of this is going back to Nina's book about Big Fat Surprise and all these research studies that were done, that cholesterol is bad and fat is bad and all these things, and really terrified people. But in the end, it's really sugar that's really the enemy, right? And primarily our focus should be, if we want to improve our energy, if we want to improve our brain health, is eating an anti-inflammatory diet. And some fats, like omega-3 fats found in fish oil, are very anti-inflammatory. They reduce inflammation and they promote optimal brain health. And why is that important? Well, because our brain, obviously is involved in many functions in the human body, but it also produces neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and GABA and all the things that we need to have mental well-being, in order to have great mood, in order to make better decisions and form better habits and being able to recall. And granted that, as a naturopath, I can go down into just how interconnected all the systems are between the neurotransmitters and hormones and gut health. But at the cornerstone of all of this is a great diet, right?
Yeah. So a whole foods based diet, but the macronutrients, which are carbs, fat, and protein, how much you need for your metabolic type. And I always think if I eat the right amount, I should feel full for 4 hours. I don't need to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 2 snacks and have even snack after dinner. People do. And I think that's what so many people, it's kind of old school, that we're trained to, I need to have these 3 meals and 2 snacks to keep my metabolism going, which I wrote about my Life is Not a Race book. I started, going into my history when I started going from this, huge high carb diet to realize, okay, this makes no sense if I'm supposed to be burning fat. So anyways, I just think, the right amount of food you should eat should make you feel full and satisfied, that I only really need 1 meal a day. And I can have a shake or something, and it depends on my work day, because I've had clients all morning. I'm not going to sit down and have a meal, but yesterday I didn't get home till 5:30, and I had a couple of these. Josh Axe has this ancient nutrition shakes, and I had 2 of those during the day because I didn't have an opportunity to actually have real food is ideal. But I realized, you know what? I don't need to eat more than that during the work week too. It's just such habit, enjoy your food and sit and relax and eat it. But I think going back to your saying, to feel energized after eat and have the right amount of your macronutrients.
Yeah. So I'll kind of add on to what you were talking about. You bring up an excellent point, and that when your metabolism is working efficiently, you really don't need to eat every 2 hours. You really don't need to have those set meals. And from a primal perspective, from a Paleolithic perspective, and by no means am I suggesting that everybody be on a paleo. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the paleo diet, just how we're actually genetically programmed. Is that we're not really programmed to have these 6 meals a day. That's not how optimally our metabolism works. And when, for example, this is actually something that's a work in progress for me, because most of my life, and that might have been the damage that I did early on in my teenage years, because I didn't have until later somebody to really show me how to eat, fuel properly, given my 6 to 9 hours that I was on the tennis court. I had many issues balancing my blood sugar, right? And so that led me to like, oh my gosh, I have to have a snack every hour, every 2 hours, because I had trouble maintaining my blood sugar levels. I would always be hypoglycemic, just constantly dropping, and I would need carbs and fat and protein. Even though I was relying on healthy snacks, my metabolism was not efficient, right? And so later on, when I switched to more endurance sports, where I did not have access to a snack for multiple hours at a time, that's when I actually discovered more of that higher fat, higher protein diet, and how it can actually help to regulate your blood sugar. It can help to regulate your hormones, your cortisol levels, and it can turn you into more of an efficient metabolizer. But one thing that I want to mention is that, you know, it doesn't work. It's so funny. I've had friends and family who are like, we're going to get on the keto bandwagon. We're going to do the ketogenic diet. And some time goes by and I'm like, so how's it working out for you? And they're like, well, you can see that I haven't lost any weight. And I'm like, what happened? They're like, well, we started eating all this high fat, but then we never got rid of the carbs. So they just basically like amped up their caloric intake, but without, you know, changing any of their macros except for just eating a higher fat. When in reality, like when you're making that shift, when you do want to be more an efficient metabolizer, when you eat a higher protein, higher fat diet, you really, you know, decrease your dependency on carbohydrates. They no longer become this, you no longer become dependent. They no longer become this, oh my gosh, I need to have my carbohydrates or I'm just going to go crazy or I'm going to bonk, right?
Yeah, you have to break that addiction. And I know you do a sugar program too, as I do, and try to, you know, I called it sugar detox, but now I'm just working towards a liver and a digestive repair reset program, because I think so many people, they don't, like you're saying, they don't know how to switch to not drop in the carbohydrates. And you do need a program and a coach to guide you, because everybody's different and there's other hidden areas that you need to work on, including, you know, the other elements of the holistic method. We talk about the sleep and the stress and digestion, gut health, but it is, you know, confusing to people. So let's go into what is a healthy source of fat and what are good sources, what are bad fats. You know, we always talk about there's no good or bad. It's a healthy ratio of things, but fats are definitely, you know, fear and the media. When we were talking a couple of months ago, it's a whole thing about coconut oil is bad for you. And then, you know, they had it in the news, and I was in Palm Springs when I saw you, and so I was with my parents and all their friends are in their 70s, and everyone's like, oh no, the doctor told me this and the nurse said this, my friend said that, no coconut oil. So let's go into your thoughts of what is a healthy source of fat, and let's even to add in what are good sources of carbs, because you said like healthy snacks, healthy foods. Let's kind of give definition of what are some good options of fats to start with, and then carbs, because people are confused on that aspect as well.
Absolutely. Those are all excellent questions. So healthy fats are things like, I actually like to get most of my healthy fats from plant-based, right? So that includes avocados, that includes nuts and seeds. And when I say nuts, I don't mean like things like peanuts, right? And when I say nuts, I don't mean roasted and salted nuts that you can find at Costco. Yeah, vegetable oil. And actually, one of the reasons why a lot of companies roast their nuts is a lot of the roasted nuts, if you were to do a lab evaluation, they actually contain mold contamination. Yeah. And the reason for that is like, you know, a company, let's say, has raw nuts that they sell in bulk. And when those raw nuts, let's say they don't sell all of them, they start to have mold build up on them and they're about to become rotten, right? Because fat, especially like raw fat found in nuts, can go rancid pretty quickly, which is why I actually recommend keep your healthy fats in your refrigerator to prolong their shelf life. But that company will try to roast the nuts in order to kind of kill off, you know, and to prep the nuts.
That was air quotes. If you're not watching video, we keep using air quotes.
The air quotes, I know, right?
You can't hear our air quotes, but that was an air quote.
The air quote, exactly. And so I always say that, like, when I'm talking about nuts, nuts that are anti-inflammatory, that contain the healthy fats, like the omega-3s, because we want to be able to have, from a physiological point of view, of course, think like fats like omega-6 and omega-9 tend to be more pro-inflammatory. So, however, we still need them, right?
Mm-hmm.
In nature, like if you were to eat a balanced diet, you'd have nuts and you'd have berries and you'd have meat and you'd have fish, and you would get a balance of omega-3, 6, and 9. So when I talk about nuts, I want to emphasize that we're talking about like pumpkin seeds, right? When I'm talking about nuts and seeds, sunflower seeds, some cashews, some almonds, lots of walnuts because they contain tons of omega-3. And we think about, Dr. Signature about how a walnut looks like the brain, right? And it's really good for brain health. And you don't have to go crazy, because sometimes people are like, oh, nuts are great for me, and then take like 3 handfuls. It's like, you only really need like
I know, that's gotta be careful
here and there, right? Moderation still becomes key. Even too much of a good thing, right? So kind of looping back to healthy fats include avocado. So great fats include avocados, nuts and seeds, and then, fish oil. Fish oil is excellent. And you can either, I'll say a couple things about that. You can either get most of your fish oil from just consuming fish. And I prefer cold water fish like sardines, which are great. Salmon is excellent, but we have to be really careful about, it's not just about macros, but it's about where you get your macros, right? And when it comes to things like fish and meat and chicken,
mercury,
really knowing your source. Because what happens, just like humans store toxins and metals in their fatty tissue, so do animals. So when we consume fish, we really want to make sure that we know the source of that fish. And unfortunately, we really shouldn't be consuming too much fish, more than 1 to 2 servings per week, just because the water is just not the same, And so, and same thing with meat. I recommend, there's the saturated fat. We haven't really talked about, the saturated fats, bad and good. But I think everything in moderation. So don't go to Costco and buy freezer full of red meat and consume it over a week, right? Having 1 to 2 servings a week is just fine. You don't need to have your burger patty in the morning, your steak in the afternoon, and your sausage, at dinner, or whatever, people tend to do. Everything in moderation. And so some of the other healthy fats, like coconut oil, right? There was a huge controversy about coconut oil. And I think the reason why sometimes these things surface up, that like, oh, coconut oil is good for you. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, wait a second, don't eat coconut oil, it's bad for you. It's like, okay, you guys, slow down a bit, right? And I think what happens is that people tend to swing to extreme of things. It's like coconut oil then becomes in everything. We make coconut oil muffins, we bake with coconut oil, we put coconut oil on our toast, when in reality, we want to be able to diversify our fats. We don't want to just eat avocados all day. We don't want to just eat almonds all day because we like them. We don't want to just eat fish 3 times a day because we heard that it's good for us. Everything in moderation, because each fat, whether it's rich in omega-3, omega-6, or omega-9, has its purpose in physiology. And what I encourage people to do is, when they take a look at their daily dietary intake, is did they diversify their carbohydrates, their fat, and their protein?
Yeah. And that's what Paul Chak, I've done his coaching program, it's holistic coach program, and they do a 4-day rotation diet. And I always find it's challenging because you tend to eat the same stuff every day, but to diversify, as you're saying, is not to eat the same food for another 4 days. So you rotate what foods, because we need so many different vitamins and minerals and get the right different kinds of fats, essential fatty acids. And it's hard if you eat the same thing every day. So it's really a good goal, I think, to mix up what you're eating, as well as you said, excellent point of looking at the source. And, that's another thought too, is the trends of, all or nothing, and whatever's hot in the news and the media, mainstream media, people go all out and overdo it. And it's same as you were talking last weekend about in the fitness industry, what was hot the last few years, it's HIIT training, high intensity interval training. You get that post epoch, you'll have their metabolism higher. So what do people do? They do it every day. So now the new trend in fitness is what? Recovery. It's like,
Right.
You know, I have people we use my zone in my studio, and I try to make sure my clients, you do a red zone day, that interval training the next 2 days, it's a green zone, but people don't feel like they get results. So now everyone's getting HPA axis problems, adrenal issues, and overtraining because of this trend of HIIT. So it's the same thing with nutrition. It's the same, whatever's hot, whatever's not, all or nothing, that we do it in all areas of life. It's interesting, our mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of want to look back towards the fat, right? We want to have a balance in the intake. And so what that means for me, for those who are non-vegan, is that you want to be able to diversify your fat from your plant-based, like I mentioned, you know, the avocados, coconut oil, nuts and seeds, with the fats that you get from, you know, seafood and from meat and from chicken and things like that, to get that optimal omega-3, 6, and 9 ratio. For those who are vegan, right? And I can't forget about eggs, because what about the controversy about eggs?
Oh yeah, big one.
Cholesterol, right? Cholesterol and eggs. You know, it's like eggs are a great source of so many key nutrients. And the only time, I have to say, that I've seen people being allergic to avocados and cannot have avocados. I've seen people being sensitive to eggs. So in all of this, if you're listening and you're saying like, well, I can't have avocados or I can't have eggs, there's a plethora of other fats that you can have. And if I'm spacing out and I'm not saying a certain food or a certain fat, they can, of course, you know, email us, contact us. We can always help them figure out what the best source of fat for them would be. But for the people who are vegan, for example, how do you optimize your fat intake? Well, like I mentioned, the plant-based, right? So we got you covered there. But there's also now great formulas that do contain the balanced omega-3, 6, and 9 that you can get in a capsule or a liquid form. But I think it's just important that if you're not eating meat or seafood, that you get these other omega-6 and 9 sources in one way or another.
Yeah, definitely. I think I found that I just bought a bottle of a good essential fat, and it's still sitting in the fridge. So I know I am better to buy the capsules, because I'll take those, but to take a spoonful of like cod liver oil or something, it just sits there, and I always end up throwing it away. So make sure if you get capsules or liquid, that you're going to take it daily and find which one works best for you. That's what nutritional therapy, if you can get a practitioner work on you to find, we do muscle testing or neurolingual testing. You test which supplements does your body need the most, because not everyone needs all of them. So you can test with someone that's trained in that area to really find out which fats is your body deficient of. And the muscle testing works amazing.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I was going to mention about fats, so which fats do we want to avoid?
Yes.
We want to avoid the processed fats, the partially hydrogenated fats. Because if we talk about, you know, we mentioned Nina's book about the big fat surprise, and how she said that, like, when the research came out that saturated fats were bad, people had to find out an alternative to those fats, right? And that turned a whole new page in the era of nutrition, which is the partially hydrogenated fats, right? The fats that are normally supposed to be liquid at room temperature, but are now solid. And this is great for processed foods, right? For shortcakes and cookies and things that you find in bags and at gas stations and in grocery stores. It's amazing how they're still floating around, right?
Yeah.
And so we definitely want to make sure that we're avoiding those. And, you know, the best way to do this is to avoid dining out as much as possible. You know, things happen. We dine out once or twice a week. It happens. But to make better decision and to be conscious of it, right? Because I think a lot of times people just kind of shut their eyes on and be like, oh, that only happens once or twice, but I'm just going to let that slip. But the more you do that, it adds up over time, right? And like I said, like, we store a lot of things in our fat. So we want to make sure that we're getting the most adequate sources of fat and the healthy sources of fat. So avoiding junk food, right? Processed foods, packaged foods. Mm-hmm. It's so easy these days to make your own snacks at home. It's so easy to just turn the label and to see what the ingredients are. You know, we can even talk about sugar real quick, right? And how something that's termed as healthy.
Almond butter is a big one. It's like you find, I remember being in Palm Desert once at the grocery store trying to find almond butter, because my parents still buy Jiffy. They don't follow anything I say. But the bottle, I could not find one bottle in Vons or whatever grocery store it was that didn't have natural organic almond butter. Supposedly that was air quotes, because the back of it, you have to read the ingredients, because there's always healthy sugar, or something evaporated cane sugar, or something in it. It's crazy. Palm kernel oil,
Corn. Yeah.
It has always stuff added, bad oils and bad sugars in there. It's crazy. But yes, read the back of the label, the ingredients. And
because a lot of times the foods that, like corn oil and soybean oil and a lot of these vegetable oils are actually really pro-inflammatory. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we want to avoid, is some of these processed oils that in the end can be carcinogenic. They can increase inflammation, and you think that you're eating, almond butter, which should be good for you. But when you turn the label and you do find all this other stuff in there, you're wondering why you're not feeling optimal, right?
Yeah, I know. I did go to the natural products show. It's called Expo West a couple weeks ago, and I was trying to do food blogging on it. And it was amazing how many foods that are natural, organic, that were really filled with stuff in it. And I found few products out there that I interviewed the people and put them slowly on our YouTube video over time. But there were not many products that are natural, organic, that actually I would say that's a great option to use. It's so hard.
Absolutely. And this is something that I try to, again, we talked about earlier about just the education component, how important it is, because so many times I feel like I'm being fooled at the store. When I go in and I'm like, perfect, this is paleo, this is keto, and I turn the label, I'm like, this does not make sense. The big print on the front is not telling me that there's 3 different sweeteners in there. There's brown rice syrup, there's cane sugar, there's something else in there, plus all these vegetable oils. Mm-hmm. And so being really a smart consumer is really important. And I kind of want to talk more about just the importance of fat on our brain health as it correlates to the food cravings. Because when we eat more sugar, we crave more sugar. Fat does not work that way. Fat actually suppresses those pathways, so that when you consume fat, it's not like you're going to get addicted to eating fat. Whereas sugar, from a primal perspective, it really targets those serotonin, those dopamine pathways that are responsible for all of our habitual behavior, that are responsible for the pleasure-seeking nature that we have. And fat does not have that. So when you switch over to eating higher fat, lower carb diet, you're actually supporting better brain health, better neurotransmitter production. You're actually not fueling those pleasure pathways that have become so sensitive and sensitized to sugar intake.
Yeah. I know we're running out of time so fast, but I have 3 podcasts that we need to do the next few months. We can do brain health, vegetable oils, and do a show on cholesterol, saturated fat, and heart disease.
Sounds amazing.
So thank you so much for such great information. Lots of things we can keep going on, but let's save those for another show, and then tell everyone where to find you and what you're up to next.
Definitely. So again, my practice is Proactive Health, a naturopathic clinic located in Bellevue, Washington. And I really try to share my knowledge on a lot of the social media. So you can find me on Instagram, Dr. Elena Zinkov. You can find me on Facebook, Proactive Health ND. And then I have a book coming out called Crave Reset, and it's about mastering the psychology and physiology of cravings. So really taking a look at how cravings shape our hormone health, digestion, brain health, and what to do about it. So that's the big project that's coming out this summer.
Oh, good for you. That's exciting. That's a big topic. We were just talking about cravings last week, and that's a great, add that to our list as well. So I got 4 episodes we need to reserve the next few months. So I'll have to have you on once a month as a co-host.
Absolutely. I absolutely love being here. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll put all the links in the show notes. And don't forget to watch us on YouTube if you want to see us on a video, thewholeathletepodcast.com, or you can find us on the iTunes or this podcast app and all sorts of places, or just go to thewholeathletepodcast.com. Also, you can go to our Facebook page and post some questions for us, and we'll get back to you.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.